Good afternoon. Welcome to Wednesday Wisdom with Major General Leah Lauderback. Please welcome INSA's Vice President for Policy, Larry Hanover.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today as we kick off a new year of INSA programming. For our first event of 2021, we're pleased to host Major General Leah Lauderback of the U.S. Space Force. More than 800 people from government, industry, academia, and the media have registered for today's event. So it's clear that INSA's community of national security practitioners is very interested in learning about the Space Force's intelligence priorities and how the U.S. will maintain space superiority. Before we begin, let me make a few brief housekeeping notes. First, we hope to make this as interactive as possible. Please submit questions through the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll do our best to get to all of your questions. Second, we're pleased to welcome members of the press to the call today. So as a reminder, this program is on the record. And finally, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Peraton, for their critical support of this program. We could not deliver this kind of thought leadership without the support of our partners. Now, I'm pleased to welcome Dean Bellamy, Vice President for Space Strategy and Development at Peraton, who will introduce our speaker. Dean, over to you.
Thank you, Larry. And I would also like to put a special thanks out to INSA for hosting this program and continuing to host a lot of really important thought leadership during really these challenging times. Peraton, as everybody knows, is a proud supporter of INSA. Peraton provides innovative and mission-critical solutions for both the DoD and IC, particularly in space operations, space ground systems, engineering, and enterprise cloud solutions. It is my privilege to introduce today's speaker, Major General Leah Lauderback. She is the Director of Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance for the U.S. Space Force. In this capacity, she serves as the Senior Intelligence Advisor to the Chief of Space Operations and is responsible to the Secretary of the Air Force and the Chief of Space Operations for policy, planning, evaluation, oversight, leadership, Space Force intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. General Lauderback has served and commanded at the wing, group, and squadron levels and served as the Senior Military Assistant to the Undersecretary of the Air Force for Intelligence. And she has led as the Director of Intelligence for the Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve in Southwest Asia. Please give a warm welcome to General Leah Lauderback.
Thank you, Dean. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Dean, and thank you to Peraton for supporting today's program. So General Lauderback, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me, Larry. Thanks to Suzanne as well. I know she's on the line. It's really an honor, and I love being asked to share any information that I can about the U.S. Space Force. So,
great. Well, we've got a lot of questions for you today, and our members are going to submit a lot of questions as well as we're talking. So, so we look forward to having a really good discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds great. Well, let me just take the first few minutes because I do want to talk and make a little bit of a pitch to folks. Really, thank you again. It's an honor to be here. I'd say truly, though, it's an honor to be part of the Space Force, and then part of what I did just get to stand up also was the U.S. Space Command. So that everybody is knowing, I am now at the headquarters of the Space Force service as a service here at the Pentagon. I'm not in the Pentagon at the moment, as you can tell. I'm in my basement. But for the past year, starting in August of 2019, I had the privilege really to help stand up the U.S. Space Command, the intelligence directorate there, and that was fabulous. My background is mainly in the air domain, and so I had a smattering of jobs here and there, positions that allowed me to understand a little bit about what was going on in space. But honestly, until my time at U.S. Space Command, I did not understand I did not understand the amount of activity that is happening from a threat perspective, from an adversary perspective, and specifically, I'll talk in a little bit, I'm sure, about what the Russians and the Chinese are doing. So I came out of that job absolutely convinced that it was the right thing to do, standing up U.S. Space Command, standing up the U.S. Space Force as well. because we have a ways to go as far as ensuring that we have the ability to, freedom and access in space, and ensuring that we're able to maintain our way of American life, but also our way of American war as well. So it's really a privilege to be part of it. So in my position right now, this is what I wanted to kind of my pitch to you all is what is it that we're doing? I have 6 priorities. And I want to briefly go over those, and I'm sure throughout the course of the next 45 minutes, we'll talk in detail about some of them a little bit more. But number one, just so folks are tracking, is that we have an issue here on culture, in that we need more of a warfighting culture in the space community, from my perspective. And so I'll speak to the ISR, the Guardians now, and the airmen that are still airmen who are affiliated with the Space Force, as am I, still an airman affiliated with the Space Force. We come from a culture of understanding ISR operations on the air side of the house. And so I think that we can understand and transit that into the Space Force. But what our airmen and Guardians need to understand is more of warfighting from a space perspective. What it is that we provide to others in all other domains, and to the COCOMs. But then also an understanding of what is ISR operations on orbit, or to gain and understand threat characterization of capabilities, whether that's on orbit or terrestrially. And so we have an opportunity here to start from the beginning of really developing that culture of space warfighting, as well as our ISR operations. Secondly is building the headquarters here at the Pentagon and the ISR Directorate. And so I won't bore you with that, but that of course is staff functions that we need to do. So we're standing up our capability here. Number 3 is developing capabilities and a capacity to do that ISR operation, in order to really understand, better characterize the threats that are out there, both from a pace, how quickly we can do this, but then also with a confidence level. And so my time at U.S. Space Command really showed me that we do not have the capability that we need. Just like in any other warfighting domain that there is, you want to be able to provide to your commander, the senior leadership, the operators, whatever it might be. You want to be able to provide a confirmation of, I know this is the enemy, I know what has happened, and I want to be able to do that as quickly as possible. So we have in front of us an opportunity to really drive that from a ISR perspective. 4th priority is strengthening our units that are out there today. So we have, and I hope everybody knows that's on the line, is that, I mean, we're still doing the mission, just the same mission that we were doing 6 months ago, two years ago type of thing. But from an intelligence perspective, we need to robust that. So we've gotten some new billets, we're robusting the manpower and the capabilities down at some of those tactical units and at the operational level. In addition, we will stand up 4 new squadrons in the next 2, 3, 4 years type of time, and happy to talk about those squadrons here a little bit later. Number 5, also in developing new squadrons, is that we do want to develop and build the National Space Intelligence Center. So happy to talk about that too. We will co-locate with NASIC and certainly collaborate and work on that together as we build the National Space Intelligence Center. And then lastly is that we do want to become a formal member of the intelligence community. And I say formal member because I feel that since I've been here since August of this year, that we're already an informal member of the intelligence community. We've got nothing but open door to ODNI, of course the combat support agencies, et cetera, all of the service twos. We're all working together, collaborating together. But we do want to become a formal member of the intelligence community. And to that end, we did put a package together that is sitting with in the ODNI's office somewhere, as well as the SecDef's office somewhere. And we're hoping that here in the next, if it's a few days or a couple of weeks, that we might actually become a formal member of the intelligence community. So, and we see that very much as a good thing, and happy to talk on that too. But other than that, Larry, that's really what I wanted to get out there. It's very exciting to be part of the organization and standing this up. I do have those 6 priorities, and if we get cut off at that point, at least I've got that out.
Right. No, that's a great overview. Thank you for highlighting your priorities. I do want to ask you about a few of those as we go on for the next 40 minutes or so. But before we do, I think it's also important to understand the threats that the Space Force has to deal with, because as you develop capabilities and as you develop your workforce and the force structure, really a lot of that is based on the threats that you have to address. So if we can talk about China and Russia in particular for a while, Chinese and Russian military doctrines both view space as a critical element of modern warfare. And both countries have tested ground and space-based anti-satellite weapons as a means of reducing US military effectiveness by taking out our satellites. So I wanted to ask, and actually this question was also posed by Bill Gertz of the Washington Times, who's online with us. What are the principal threats that the US faces in the space domain, and what will the future of warfighting in space look like?
Yeah, thank you. So, so you hit on probably, here are the two primary threats that we face from a space perspective. That is terrestrially and then on orbit. In both of those domains, terrestrially and on orbit, there are jammers, there are lasers, there are missiles, satellite with a robotic arm. And I'll talk to a couple of these specifics first, but the bottom line is that some of these are operational by our adversaries, and others are in testing. But absolutely, we see that this is the future. This is where the adversary wants to go. This is not something that the United States wants to, where we wanted to go necessarily. This is something that very much the Chinese, and certainly starting with their first direct ascent ASAT launch back in 2006, I think it was. Which I think woke up quite a bit of us in the intelligence community and in the Department of Defense. But nonetheless, from the Russian standpoint, just in the last few months, we actually saw another test, and I stress another test. This is not their first of a missile that launched from the ground and aims to destroy satellites in low Earth orbit. Also, for the entire year of 2020, and I was, front and center to this when I was at U.S. Space Command, is that I got to see their capability on orbit and what it is that they wanted to release kinetically, test as far as a test is concerned, and they came out and they stated that publicly too. So we know that they have this. We know they have this in mind, and certainly militaries don't just develop these. From a deterrent standpoint, at least I don't think so. I think that they have an idea that they want to be able to use this in the future. They certainly, as you alluded to, Larry, in the very beginning, is that, and they understand our dependence on space, what it affords every single person on the battlefield, and so they want to be able to deny us that. I would also tell you that it's not just about counter space capabilities. We're concerned about that certainly from a protection standpoint and a defense standpoint for our capabilities. But really, it's also about how they use space to enable their capabilities too, right? And so that's something that we very much need to closely look at, especially with the Chinese, and that just in all domains where they are robusting their capabilities within all domains of the military. In the specific, as far as I spoke there to the Russian capability on orbit, as well as a Russian capability launched terrestrially. Also, we're concerned about the same from a Chinese standpoint, but I'll also say that the Chinese do have a satellite with a robotic arm, and we are concerned that this type of robotic arm technology could be used in the future. In order to develop a system, if you will, that has a grappling arm type of thing. So something that you would be concerned with, in that it doesn't go bang. There might not be any debris. It's really hard to attribute from an intelligence standpoint that something has happened in whichever regime within on orbit. And so that is absolutely something that we're very concerned about. And again, as I stated earlier, we need these ISR capabilities, either terrestrially or on orbit, but something that gives us a confirmation, a confidence to be able to say, hey, this is, this just happened, and this is who did it, right? So that our policymakers and commanders can do what they need with that information. And then lastly, I would say that China absolutely has multiple ground-based laser systems, varying power levels, and so they do have the ability to blind or damage our satellite systems. And so, again, my time at U.S. Space Command put all of these first and foremost in my mind, and so I'm confident that we're characterizing these as best we can right now, but we have a ways to go.
And I guess as a corollary to this threat, I mean, there's also a threat to satellites that support the American civilian sector, right? The economy and other non-military functions, GPS satellites and the like. Is there a concern as well? I mean, as we see Russia and other countries try to disrupt civilian infrastructure, cyber infrastructure on Earth, is there a concern as well that these adversaries might be trying to disrupt civilian satellites that are critical to the functioning of the economy? And if so, what's the role of Space Force, ISR, in understanding those threats?
Yeah, so I would just say to answer that is that we do have that role from a Space Force perspective as well as from a Space Command perspective, right? And we know that there's I mean, the agreement between U.S. Space Command and NRO as far as the protection and defense of our capabilities. But we don't just say that it's a defense of our own, military Department of Defense or IC. No kidding. The defense of all commercial civil capabilities that we have on orbit. And however, to answer, I think the first part of your question there, Larry, is that I can't say for certain that adversaries are trying to go out there and defeat a civil capability. But what I would say is that we are very concerned about debriefing, and that once that starts, there's that's not impossible, but I mean very difficult and challenging in order to maintain a free ability to maneuver at any orbit. And so absolutely that's a concern.
Right. So now that we have an understanding of the threats that Space Force ISR is dealing with, what are your current and expected future intelligence priorities? I'm sure the space domain poses some interesting and unique challenges to intelligence collection as well as analysis, but what are your top priorities, and how are you going to deal with those challenges of working in the space domain?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the priorities there, and so one of the priorities was the matter of trying to develop capability that we have that it gives us a confirmation, more confidence in calls that we're making. So the attribution of who's taking or making an activity on orbit, but then also being able to just characterize it, period. So again, in my time at U.S. Space Command, it's so this is not unique to space, but I will say that it just is so much more difficult in trying to characterize something that happened 12,000 miles away or however many more miles away, right? All through technical means of and something that flies over the Earth once every 90 minutes type of thing. So we need some persistence on orbit, I think, and we need some sensors somehow that, and it doesn't matter to me what type of sensor it is. I just want to be able to make a more confident call in a more faster manner. So that I'd say is very much one of my high priorities for being able to characterize the threats out there. Okay. Another priority would be, and I know we'll talk a little bit probably more on sharing, but let me just talk to it now. So this is not something that the United States can do by itself, and so many countries are using the domain. So many countries have the same concerns that we do as to making it safe and stable and allowing anybody access to it. So we need to be able to have, and it needs to be a two-way street with other international partners that we have, civilian partners, commercial partners, whatever it might be. And so from my perspective as the senior intelligence officer, now I haven't delved into this greatly, but we need to get going on this, is what are our intelligence sharing agreements with, specifically international partners. And, we've got some great sharing agreements with Five Eyes. We need to increase that. We need to educate people on what the threat is. And so you have to pass, what is that information? What is that intelligence? As opposed to just trying to say, hey, believe me, This is what, the US sees this or says this. Instead,
Right.
we need to put those sharing agreements in place. And in some cases we have those, but we need to robust that for sure.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about partnerships. The Five Eyes partnerships are clearly important, as you mentioned, but it's also really important for the Space Force to work together with the broader intelligence community, with other military services, with NRO and NGA in particular, in the IC. So you alluded to the fact that Space Force is likely to become the newest member of the intelligence community, perhaps sooner rather than later. So how will that interagency sharing work? And how will becoming a member of the intelligence community actually improve the Space Force's intelligence capabilities or the value of its intelligence?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. So let me say that, this puts us on par. If we do get to become members of the intelligence community, then it just puts us on par with all of the other services.
Right.
And I think I mentioned earlier is that, informally we get invited to meetings and things like that, but formally, at some point, there is an ability as an IC member to be able to influence and compete for, if that's resources or it's a collection in this area or more analysis in this area, whatever it might be. And so that's really, that is going to help us tremendously. On the other flip side of that is not just a one-way street, us getting information from the intelligence community. It's also what is it that we're providing Space Force intelligence capability to them as well. And so very much look forward to that. That's only going to increase and enhance our understanding of the space domain, right, across the IC and then and certainly within the Department of Defense. I attend meetings regularly with Joint Staff or with USDI, that type of thing, and so it's still one of those things where we're the youngest member, and so we're trying to again educate folks on what's coming down the pike and how it is that we need to be working together as a team. Again, everybody's excited about it and happy to help us along the way, but we have I'd say a ways to go.
Great. So there's another critical partner that you need to work with, and that's the private sector, industry. And many of our listeners today are from the private sector. So we have a couple of questions about the kind of support that Space Force is going to need from industry. So one question, for example, that we received from Patrick Hanley of Lockheed Martin is where should industry focus its R&D investments? And then more broadly, how does the Space Force plan to partner with the private sector?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So there's two ways that I guess I would answer this, and one is writ large within the Space Force. Excuse me. That there's already a ton of partnering that is happening with industry. We certainly realize that we can't do it without industry. As a matter of fact, when General Raymond stood up the Space Force staff here, the headquarters, he stood up the CTIO, which is the Chief of Technology and Innovation Office. So Major General Kim Kreider, she's in charge of the CTIO, and that wasn't something that I think that originally we had thought about, but General Raymond absolutely wanted to make it happen, and he wants a focus on making the force digital. That's like kind of the first step. When we think of just analog processes that we're working in the Pentagon or out at Schriever or wherever it might be, getting people to think digital, and then with that, we're educating ourselves then from an innovation standpoint. That I think probably a lot of industry folks, you guys are already smart on this. You already understand it. But a lot of us do not, especially some of us that are older in the service. And so to that end, General Kreider actually has all of us working on some university classes, essentially, to give us the basics of what is computer programming. So that's just the start of what we will eventually get to is really a cadre of cyber warriors, if you will, that she will develop. But nonetheless, so there's a lot that's going on from a Space Force perspective. From an intelligence perspective in the Space Force, what I would say is, again, I need help with a persistent ISR capability to be able to characterize threats. And if there are small satellites that industry is throwing up there, how do I, get to be? How do I become a part of that?
Okay.
I know that there's probably some conversations about this already, and perhaps you're tracking on DNI. Director Ratcliffe actually just stood up a council, the Intelligence Community Commercial Space Council, and
Right.
so I know that they've only had one meeting right now, but we will certainly be a part of that. I can see that there's going to be so much goodness as far as understanding commercial aspects of what is seen, what is put up on orbit, and then how do we partner together to ensure that right, there's a protect and defend, and then there's perhaps a sharing of information, that type of thing. So I'm looking.
I see Commercial Space Council be a principal mechanism for industry to connect with Space Force ISR and others in the IC.
I think that it will. I mean, it might be too soon for me to say that definitively, but I think that it is going to be certainly so another way for us, and probably will become the principal way for us to have those communications, those conversations. Okay. Yeah. Also, I would say.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, Larry, I was just going to say, I mean, other things that I would, investments, R&D money into, it's a AI ML. So as you can imagine, I mean, and we're already doing this with the other services where we've, trying to make machines do the exploitation for us as opposed to humans having to do it. It is only going to robust. It is only going to grow and increase in numbers when if there are Title 10 capabilities that go on orbit that have us do this ISR mission. I'm just going to need some more help with that for sure. Yeah, and so and then lastly, I would say, and I noticed this when I was out at U.S. Space Command. Honestly, it's a COP. It's a common operating picture that that not all of us are physicists or electrical engineers. I mean, I'm a poli-sci major, and I haven't seen anything that really helps me to understand the physics, the orbitology. I mean, in an easy manner to understand, right? I mean, so there's a ton of guys that are out there at Triever that are physicists and engineers, and they can get it, but that's not the entire force, and most of our leadership can't understand that, and so we've got to be able to develop displays, to be able to display and understand this, that political sciences like myself can actually understand.
Right. No, as an English major, I often found myself in the position of translating, something into into language that politicians, I worked on the Hill, or policymakers can understand. So I can identify with that. But that also raises a really interesting question. So the technology is going to be important in helping you translate technical intelligence into something that military commanders and policymakers can understand. But you also need a workforce that can do that. So given that intelligence is now, or soon will be, one of 5 career fields in the Space Force, what is your strategy for recruiting, training, and retaining intelligence professionals, particularly analysts, who can do that work and sort of translate the technical intelligence into insights that commanders and policymakers can understand?
Yeah, thank you. So I would tell you that, Larry, we're small, and we're going to be small for a while. I mean, if not forever, who knows? But I would say that from a retention standpoint, one of the things that we're trying to do in the Space Force is to ensure that everybody actually, they truly understand what it is that they're doing for the nation. Right. And I think that we'll be able to do that because we're so small, that we will be able to keep folks, have them do the things that they want to do. One of the areas that we're really looking at for in the future, we're probably not going to be able to do this too soon in the next year or two type of thing. But as opposed to being just an intelligence officer, I want that intel officer to, no kidding, be a cyber operator, and I want him also to be to be a space operator. I would love it if they were able to go fly a satellite at, at some point, and then come back into the intel career field. Or I'll take a space operator who's been doing that for 6 years, and then bring him over, and then let me train him to be an intelligence officer for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it might be.
Right.
So that we've all got so that we're much those 5 career fields as opposed to 5. Then really, if we can get down to 1, and then we've got a true brainiac warfighter that understands everything that we need about and everything that we understands everything we need about warfighting. So.
Right.
So from a retention standpoint, I think that we have a great opportunity. It's really exciting to be able to develop people in that way. Also, hopefully everybody has heard. We're really trying to attract STEM folks. As an intelligence officer, I understand that there is a need for that, and probably in any other domain, this is probably the most important domain to have STEM. But I would also say I don't want to lose the A, as one of my mentors used to say, the arts, right? So STEAM, we would say STEAM, and I still need some of those folks that think and understand intent, because just getting capabilities that the adversary has doesn't get you everywhere that you need to be.
Right.
Anyhow, we will have to restructure some of our training that we do. Out at Goodfellow Air Force Base. I'm going to visit those folks here in just a couple of weeks, actually understand where we are with the curriculum as it is today, and then where do we need to go in the future to ensure that our intelligence officers and enlisted folks as well are getting more of the space flavor, because they just don't get enough of it right yet. Right. And then on the flip side of that is that we need to do better at training and educating our operators, both space and our cyber team, on what are those threats and what is intelligence, as opposed to just the threat. We really want folks to understand a little bit more of how do we get that intelligence, because there's an art to it, and a lot of capability that many people just don't know unless you've been in this business. So
right, and understanding what intelligence can do, but also what it can't do. Because that's important as well. So one other question I wanted to touch on regarding the workforce is diversity. Events throughout the country this year have led a number of organizations to revisit and emphasize their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the armed forces and the intelligence community are no different. So what do you do as a leader to ensure that everyone in the Space Force intelligence discipline is valued and heard, and that they all have equal opportunities to advance and contribute to the mission?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously, as a senior leader and as a woman in the Air Force and now in the Space Force, it is, it's always been on my mind. There have been many opportunities that I've been the only woman in the room, many opportunities where I've been the woman at the head of the table, and there's only a few of us women in the room, type of thing. Also, as an intelligence officer, I've always understood and proclaimed that, we've got to have diversity of thought. So with the diversity, it's got to be inclusive as well. So yes, the things that showed us that reared their heads this summer, I think honestly will put us on a good path, not only in the Air Force but also in the Space Force. And so the Department of the Air Force is highlighting diversity and inclusion, and actually developing an office that will answer specifically to the Secretary of the Air Force, and has built a number of what are called barrier analysis working groups, or BOGs. And these barrier analysis working groups, some of them have been around for a while. Like the Women's Initiative team has been around a while and is doing great things to change policy, and it goes back to retaining women, in that case, because there are things that they see, we can make changes to, and so I want to be part of that, that makes changes, that allows things to be easier on my life, that type of thing. And so, so the WIT is one of those, but there are a number of other groups that that have just stood up in the last few months, and all of that is moving us in the right direction of making everybody understand that they are loved, and they are needed, and they are included in this force. And so, and I would have to say, there's nobody that I know more than General Raymond who speaks to this, privately and publicly, and that so he is developing that culture for the Space Force right from the start and right from the top. And so I think it's fabulous and fantastic to be part of that.
Great. Well, let me turn to a number of questions because we've got dozens of questions that have come in and unfortunately I won't have time to get to all of them. But let me start with a few key ones. This one is interesting because INSA will be focusing its spring symposium in April on open source intelligence. So we have a question about OSINT from David Hall with Babel Street, who asks, what role will publicly available information and open source intelligence play in satisfying Space Force intelligence requirements and operations?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. It greatly will, right? There are some things that I am coming to realize that we are going to have to ruthlessly prioritize in the Space Force as we stand up, and the ISR Directorate specifically. So I would take, from a collection standpoint, what are the things that I want? I need some SIGINT, I need some GEOINT, I need MASINT. These are capabilities that today help us greatly. OSINT also helps us, but we just don't use it enough. And traditionally, I think as intelligence officers, we are suspect of it, but we absolutely have to get over that, and so we are going to do it. One area that we're not going to concentrate on quite as much is humans. So it doesn't mean that we won't have humans requirements. We certainly already do. Space Command has those on the books. I mean, our Space Force tactical units has those on the books, but we will not be standing up a Space Force human capability.
Right.
We will, maintain others or use others, specifically the Air Force, probably mostly for that perspective. But yeah, OSINT will be, again, I think this is an evolving area, or it's an area where we're all trying to use it more robustly. And so that will be absolutely from a Space Force perspective we'll use.
Okay.
As a matter of I'll tell you OSINT, publicly available information. This is one of the things that back in the summer was a confirmation of what it is that the Russians had done on orbit, right? It was OSINT that gave us the final yes, that's what happened. And so yeah, the confirmation there was fabulous.
Right, and there are a lot of good sources out there that are reporting on these issues, so that really complements what you're able to collect and analyze on the classified side. So we have another question from Jim Keffer from Lockheed Martin. Asks a little bit more of a technical operational question. What is the Space Force primary focus for enabling joint all-domain operations and supporting joint all-domain command and control?
Mm-hmm. Sure, so yes, thank you, sir, for the question. So the Space Force is all in on ABMS and then JADC2. And the general that I had mentioned earlier, Major General Kim Kreider, who is our PTIO, this is falling in her bailiwick, but we absolutely have a large part of this from an intelligence perspective. And so my deputy actually right now, Mr. Joe Rouge, if that name is familiar, he's our lead for understanding how do we become more integrated, right? And so we've done a number of these. Oh shoot, I can't think of the name, but events, ABMS and JADC2 events over the course of the last year or 18 months. And they've all shown progress in how it is that we are gaining information, data, right? That information is getting out to everybody from an open standard type of perspective. And all of that's great. But, from my perspective, and I've sat in on a couple of these where it's still, there's some stuff that is white carded, and we have got to get past the white carding. And so Joe Rouge in my office, and then working, of course, with General Kreider and the rest of the team that's part of this. The intelligence community has to be part of this. We have to get to integrating more, passing data, open standard, et cetera, in order to be successful in this endeavor.
Yeah, great. Now I know earlier in the discussion you said you wanted to talk about the NASIC. So we have a question from Jetta Breslow asking about the NASIC, how the new National Space Intelligence Center will work with the Space Force and the intelligence community to address space-related threats to national security, and how and to what extent the center will do more than what NASIC already does.
Great, thank you. Yes, so so in general, every service has an intelligence center. I actually commanded at NASIC a number of years ago. What a privilege it was, what a fantastic workforce, great mission, that scientific and technical intelligence, that foundational intelligence that you need to really understand the adversary. And so as we stand up the Space Force, of course, we want to be able to provide requirements. We want to be able to provide prioritization. We want to ensure that our questions are being answered. And so there was a study, and now we don't have the direction 100% yet, but we are going towards it. I will say that we are marching towards standing up a National Space Intelligence Center. Probably by the late fall, maybe a year from now type of time frame. It will develop from those two core squadrons that are at NASIC. So the Space Analysis Squadron and the Counter Space Analysis Squadron, they'll be the nucleus, they'll be the core of NSIC, and then we will smatter a little bit of overhead on that to ensure that they're getting what they need. We absolutely want that to be co-located with NASIC at Wright Pat, and again, as a commander there, there's no way that we want to destroy the synergy that comes out of all of these squadrons being able to walk down the hallway and talk to each other about the engineering, the modeling, the whatever that goes into the final assessments. And so so that's what we're looking to do, and we're in the beginnings of that right now, but I think that we've got agreement that we will go ahead and make that happen.
Okay. Let me turn to a question that we have from Paul Becker, who asks about any plans for reservists in the Space Force or liaisons from other agencies, combat support agencies, or IC agencies to help you execute your mission.
Yeah, thank you. So from a reservist standpoint, there are already reservists that are helping us. They're Air Force airmen who are doing that from an IMA status. There's a conversation at a much larger level, and I couldn't tell you the exact status on it, but how do we include the reserve force actually to make it really a combined and a total force with active duty Space Force? And so that conversation is still happening. But what I would tell you also on the combat support agencies, and we do actually have 3 JDA positions on our Space Force headquarters staff that we're just about to hire. We've just interviewed, and we're about to hire three folks to help us with this. And even prior to those JDAs, we actually have detailees. Now we have a detailee right now from NRO. We've got a detailee from NSA, and then from a couple of the other services as well, the Army and the Navy. Because it's just a matter of everybody is helping us to stand up. What we'd like to do, of course, is to formalize all of that for the future. And we intend to, but there's also a much larger conversation that's happening with the Army and the Navy and who will come over from a capabilities and a manpower perspective. And unfortunately, I couldn't tell you where we are with that. And I certainly wouldn't want to get out in front of my boss and say something wrong. So, but what I would, that diversity of thought, I'm all for it, and we'd love to see more. Some more perspective.
Let me squeeze one more question in here before we run out of time. We have a question from Alec Jackson about the role of Space Force ISR in developing greater domain awareness in the Arctic.
All right, yes, I'll go for it. I know that the Arctic is something that we're is developing, I guess, as far as I won't say a problem area, but an environment that we know that we need to engage in more. And so,
and potentially an environment in which we'll encounter Russian submarines and other vessels as well as Russia expands its reach into the Arctic.
Yeah, you bet. And this is where I think that intelligence sharing or from a space perspective, whatever it might be with other countries that are perhaps in that same area that would. I won't mention any at this moment, but nonetheless, that's where I think that we can help out for sure.
Okay, Great. So we're coming to the end of our time. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to share before we wrap up?
No. Yeah, I know we only got a minute, but thank you again for the invite. I will just shamelessly plug here my Tiger Paw and my Port Clemson Tigers that were defeated by a different organization this last week, but a real pleasure. Thank you very much. Anytime questions, I would absolutely love to field and love to educate and inform on what we're doing in the Space Force. So thank you, Larry.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your candid insights this afternoon, and also for your insights back in September when we had a panel on military intelligence issues at our summit that INSA and AFCEA run jointly. So that was, I think, your first appearance at one of our events, and we were glad to have the Space Force take part in that discussion, and again today. So thanks very much for sharing your insights. For all of you watching online, thank you as well for joining us. Once again, thank you to our sponsor, Peraton, for its critical support of this program. And we hope you all can join us at a future INSA event. Looking ahead, we have a very busy schedule in January and February. Next Tuesday, January 12th, we will hold a coffee and conversation with senior NSA leader Rob Joyce, who currently serves as the Special Liaison Officer at the US Embassy in London. On January 27th, we'll welcome Director of Naval Intelligence Vice Admiral Jeffrey Trussler to the program. And then on February 2, we'll host Lieutenant General Mary O'Brien, Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance, and Cyber Effects Operations for the US Air Force. So a lot of military intelligence related issues here at INSA in January and February. As always, visit our website at insaonline.org to keep current on INSA news and programs. When the webinar ends, there'll be a short survey that pops up. Please take a few minutes to complete it and let us know how we did. Your insights really do help us choose speakers who are of interest to you and improve our programs. So that concludes today's event. Stay safe and healthy and have a wonderful day.